Palestinian Arab terrorists murdered 4 of their own children in the Gaza Strip, and this was the response in New York City. Yes, a rocket that terrorists shot at Israel fell short, killing 4 of their own, and the world rushed to blame Israel. Hello and welcome to the Israel Guys, where we believe that in a world of anti-Israel propaganda and Jew hatred, you should have a direct connection to the land and people of Israel. Glad to have you with us here in the biblical heartland of Israel on the Mount of Blessing, aka falsely known as the West Bank. It's actually Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria, and we are on location bringing you the full update. You probably know that there was more than 1,000 rockets shot out of Gaza into Israel about a week ago, lasted a couple of days. Yes, we've been sending out some of the reports over the week, but today we have a full analysis talking about what's fake, what's not true, and what you really need to know about this conflict. Make sure you subscribe, hit that notification bell. You don't want to miss out on any of the content. We're coming to you Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, as well as lots of other content on our social media pages and at theisraelguys.com. So make sure you subscribe and get those comments going down below. We love to see the interaction. Okay, ready for the 30-second recap, Josh?
Yes.
Latest round of fighting with Gaza. In a nutshell, last Friday, Israel carried out precise strikes, and I do mean precise, even taking out a bedroom of an apartment building without damaging the rest of the building, taking out terrorists and terrorist leaders in the Gaza Strip, some of whom were on their way to carry out terror attacks. They even found a tunnel that was leading from the Gaza Strip into Israel, meant for terrorist attacks. Palestinian Islamic Jihad, another faction besides Hamas in the Gaza Strip, shot more than 1,000 rockets at Israel in response. An Israeli home was struck by a rocket. 4 Palestinian Arab children were killed by a rocket that fell short and landed inside Gaza. 1 in 4 rockets do happen to land in Gaza a lot of times. So the biggest, because Israel has the Iron Dome, they're able to protect themselves. But so the biggest casualties or sufferers from the rockets coming out of Gaza are their own people. Then Egypt brokered a ceasefire. The world blamed Israel, even though there's video footage of the rocket falling inside Gaza, and the world blamed Israel for pretty much the whole entire thing. So there you go. That's exactly what happened, but we're going to get into a little bit more. But first, I want to play something because it's actually, it's a little bit worse than usual. This is a protest that happened in New York City this past week, kind of in response to the conflict with Gaza. You might be really shocked. Let's roll that video.
Resistance is not terrorism. Palestinians have every single right to defend themselves by any means necessary.
Okay, if you're like me, you're a little bit worked up at this point because that was pretty outrageous, and that was on American soil, such evil hate speech against the beloved nation of Israel. Now, there's one thing that actually also riled me up is, if they could actually sing, that would be much better. That was some really evil sounding voices, screeching, horrible. I guess it matched the content. So yeah, that was the only good thing about that, is that was some horrible presentation given with some horrible statements. But yes, they don't want 2 states. We mentioned that last week. They want all of it. If that's news for you, welcome to the Arab world and Arab thought regarding the situation here in Israel. Wake up, world.
Can I say something about that progression real quick? Because at one point, There was no idea of a two-state solution. And then it was introduced by leaders and politicians, right? So then they said, we want a two-state solution, but in the background and in secret meetings and in Arabic statements sometimes, they really said, we want all of Palestine, whereas now it's slowly progressed. And this is probably the most bold, outright, in English, on American soil statement of they're just saying outright, we do not want a two-state solution. We want all of it.
And you know what, Luke? There's something else here. If you could just say a lie, and I'll actually quote Hitler because it's the same exact thing. You say a lie long enough and loud enough, people start believing it. And that's the really scary part about this, is that this is accepted lie that's being broadcasted and promoted in America on the streets of America. If you stand with Israel, you stand for death and destruction. What in the world? Now, that's just taking the truth. Israel stands for life. Israel promotes life. Israel is one of the healthiest countries on the globe. Incredible, helping like more than any other nation. They're just incredibly on the forefront of advancing and moving forward. And you're going to have the audacity to say, if you stand for Israel, you stand for death and destruction. You're taking the facts and flipping it on its head.
At the same time, while a rocket is killing the Palestinian children.
Right. Yeah, exactly. They're killing their own people.
Rockets are being rained on Israel. Israel is not targeting civilians, and actually there's video and footage and text of them aborting missions whenever there's a civilian near. But if you stand for death and destruction, you know that if you stand with Israel, you also stand with death and destruction.
How about this?
Don't even worry about the Palestinian Islamic Jihad.
Let's not even come up with our own synopsis here. Let's just look at what they're saying. Israel stands for death and destruction. The next lines are, settlers go back home, Palestine is ours, and then they're going to talk about, on our blood and on our, war, we will not stop. I mean, come on. You don't have to really dig very deep to find out that actually the bloody libel and lifestyle that's they're promoting an awful. We're talking about terrorism. So broad daylight support of terrorism is what you got here. Resistance is not terrorism. Excuse me. What we're seeing when you have rockets, those rockets didn't just all of a sudden pop up after Israel went in. And those tunnels didn't just all of a sudden appear when Israel went in to take them out. No, this was a long buildup of terror infrastructure that we're about to outline to you guys of the more of the story, the ins and outs, and actually some of the big, broad misunderstandings that are happening right now on the globe concerning Israel and its relationship to Gaza and the Gaza Strip.
I want to say one other thing too, in that they're basically, this protest happening in New York City, they're basically promoting the idea of ethnic cleansing, because when they say settlers go back home, Palestine is ours alone, they don't want two states. They basically want they want the entire state of Israel, Judenrein.
Yeah.
They want no Jews here. They're promoting kicking 7 million Jewish people out of the land of Israel so that it can be completely ethnically cleansed. The whole entire thing can be theirs.
And also, Luke, you don't have to research very far to find out how they would like to do that.
Nope.
And
they
basically
teach it in their schools.
Yeah, and it's very bad.
Yeah.
Very bad and very bloody. And basically what they said about Israel is flip it on its head once again, and we're going to do that this whole show. Flip it on its head and you'll find it's true.
Guys, good news and bad news. The bad news is it's too late to sign up to join us for the Grape Harvest. The deadline was yesterday, I believe. But the good news is you can sign up for a trip that starts just after the Grape Harvest. And depending on the weather, you might actually get to harvest a few grapes. That is our tree planting trips. They're brand new this year. We have a 2-week trip and a 5-week trip starting on October 19th and a 3-week trip that starts on November 2nd. It's just what it sounds like. You get to come to the land of Israel right after a year of the sabbatical, which ends in September, and you get to put trees in the ground. Prophets said it was going to happen. The land of Israel has been desolate for 2,000 years. Now we're planting trees. We have 3,000 trees to plant this October and November, and you can join us for a really special volunteer program where you not only get to put trees in the ground, but you get to experience the heartland and meet the people here in a way like no other. It is off the beaten track kind of tour to Israel. You get off the tour bus, you get your hands dirty, and it's a life-changing experience. So 2-week and 5-week trip, they start on October 19th. The 3-week trip starts on November 2nd, and you can check all of those trips out at serveisrael.com. We'll put a direct link in the description below, but don't wait, because that's not a lot of time to go sign up. I don't know if I can read all this, but I wanted you to literally hear some of these words because there is text of a recording of an Israeli security agent warning a Gazan resident to get all of the civilians in the area to safety because they're about to hit a terrorist building, okay? And I'm just going to read at least some of this. So they're literally, and I've seen, we've shown video footage of this before, is the Israel calls up an Arab living in Gaza in the area, and they go, Israeli security agent, what's your name, sir? And he says, my name's Abu Hasira. And he says, Abu Hasira, may God bless you. Listen to me carefully. The Gazan says, okay. And he says, look, my brother, you know how we act, okay? I don't want anyone to be hurt. I'm telling you that I see people returning to homes, to buildings, and going out. Now help me. Is the Khalifa building empty? And the Gazan said, there's no one there. He says, okay, are you certain that there's no one there now? Are you sure? You saw it with your own eyes. He says, I see it with my own eyes, and there's no one on the street. He says, okay, are the homes behind the house? Are they empty as well? And the Gazan says, they're all empty. And then the Israeli security guard agent says, so are those 4 people I saw coming out 4 minutes ago? And the Gazan says, we told them to go out because they're about to bomb the house out back. And the Israeli security agent says, okay, listen, all the buildings and home around the Khalifa building are empty, right? The Gazan says, yes. And the Israeli security agent says, listen to what's going to happen in 4 minutes, okay? Soon I'm going to open fire. I'll fire a warning shot, okay? I don't want people standing in the intersection. I know that was a little bit long, but I wanted you to understand what's happening there. Israel is calling their enemies because they're about to bomb a terrorist building, but they're calling them up ahead of time, and they're saying, and they're checking, is the building empty? And he says, yes, it's empty. Are you sure you saw it with your own eyes? Did you check the buildings behind that building? What about those people I just saw? And then he goes on and on. Are you sure? Absolutely sure. Okay, here's what's going to happen. I want everybody out of the road, out of the buildings, out of everywhere. 4 minutes, we're going to fire a warning shot. We don't want anybody to get hit. Like, is there any other military or nation in the world that does that?
No, and most people would think that that's considered crazy because who tells their enemy what they're doing before they go in except for Israel on an ultra mission to not cause harm to to
I don't think the U.S. military even does that. Like,
Luke, nobody
fighting
does
in
that.
the Middle East.
Of course not. And Luke, this goes right into the anti-Israel rhetoric out there is so incessant and so evil that even the good things that Israel does, again, they flip it around and try to make it like evil as possible. So right now, here we go. We're going to do this. We're going to debunk the anti-Israel verbiage that is going out like crazy right now. What about disproportionate force? You hear that. It's all over the news. Terrorists have basic homemade rockets. Did you just hear what I said? They have homemade rockets. Rockets, not like slingshots. You know, I made slingshots as a boy. That's okay. I mean, I still hurt somebody. No, they're making rockets and they're shooting them out into civilian populated areas of Israel. But yet the world is saying, listen, they just have little homemade rockets. And Israel, on the other hand, has precision guided missiles. This just is not fair. Now that's like, you've got like some real grown up brats on the stage right now. They're literally telling the world that it's not fair.
I mean, yes, they're not like super high tech guided laser system rockets.
No,
but they're like missiles. These are missiles. They just have a hard time aiming them. That's the main thing. But they aim them at Israel, and like we said, sometimes they land inside Gaza, and that's why it hurts their own people. But these are explosive missiles. An Israeli house was hit, destroyed. Yeah. If it hits inside a house or a home or people or a bus stop, it kills them. The only reason why there's not so many casualties in Israel is because they have the Iron Dome.
Right. And this is a horrible argument to start with.
Maybe they're saying the Iron Dome is just disproportionate for use of...
Yeah, well, Luke, the Palestinians don't have an Iron Dome. Well,
actually, they do.
Yeah,
what's called Don't Shoot Rockets at Israel.
Yeah. No, that actually works. Don't dig tunnels. Don't shoot rockets. Don't attack Israel.
Basically, really called Don't Kill Jews.
Right. Yeah. Let's get this, Luke. The Times, Global Times, back in the last May 2021, when we had the Gaza. They decided to do it then. It's a periodic things happen. Gaza, they shoot rockets. They collect a bunch of rockets and they start shooting them once they get enough. This is what they said. Heavy artilleries, drones, and fighter jets have been employed by Israel in its largely disproportionate military response to the attacks by Palestinian militants who lack such advanced weapons. inflicting a heavy toll on the lives and properties of Palestinian civilians. What a twist is that? Ridiculous. The United Nations, also, the High Commissioner of Human Rights, denounces Israel's unnecessary, they say, this is unnecessary. They're going to tell Israel it's unnecessary to defend yourself from rockets flying into your civilian populated areas. Unnecessary and disproportionate, again, to use force against the Palestinians. What in the world? UN, you just lost all right. This is ridiculous, okay? Again, that was that's UN's approach basically overall. Any kind of situation happening in Israel, UN says disproportionate, and you really shouldn't be doing that at all. You don't have any rights in your own country to defend yourself. Thanks you, UN, but that's incorrect and inconsistent. You must protect your citizens, and thank God Israel's actually doing that right now. And then the other argument, disproportionate. Well, what, Luke, you mentioned it. More Palestinians are dying than Israelis. What, do you want more Israelis to die? Like, what's the argument? I really don't understand that at all. That's like most Jew hatred you could possibly have. Who started the fight to start with, right? You have this Islamic Jihad attacking Israel, and then Israel retaliates and blows them out. Like literally wipe out terrorism. That's actually cool. We can say that. Wipe out the terrorists. We want all terrorists dead. We can say that right now. We can say that and believe in it. Israel needs to completely wipe out all the terror infrastructure, and that's actually what they're doing right now. Al Jazeera says,
well, less Palestinians would actually be dying if they weren't accidentally shooting rockets at their own people too.
Correct.
Or shooting rockets from like hospitals and schools and, civilian centers, basically using their children as human shields.
Yeah.
So yes, some Palestinians do unfortunately die as casualties of the conflict, as it happens all over the world. But a whole lot of them also die by the hands of their own people.
Yeah.
And their own terrorists.
It's true.
Because they don't care about them.
Al Jazeera, Luke, says that they note how uneven it is. It's just not fair. It's uneven. The fight between Israel, which has vast military capabilities, compared to the Islamic Jihad.
So basically, when the Palestinians try to kill Jews, it's just not fair because Israel it's uneven because Israel's bigger and stronger. If they could be a little bit weaker, then it would be a lot more fair when they try to kill you.
All right, so let's just X that off. Disproportionate force, X'd. We're canceling that from the rhetoric. If you see disproportionate force, go ahead and just say, I'm not subscribing to that news anymore. If they've used disproportionate force against terrorism, you don't want to be their friend, because guess what? They're coming after you next, okay? Just get that. If they're going to go for Israel, they're going for you. We're talking about destroying terror infrastructure. So there's no disproportionate force against terror infrastructure. It needs to be absolutely eradicated, okay? Moving on. Flagrant act of aggression. The UN likes to use this term, and then also leftist news agencies love the term flagrant act of aggression. The UN Special Reporter for the Palestinian Territory condemns Israel's bombardment of the Gaza Strip, okay? Calling it, here we go, a flagrant act of aggression. Now, this just happened. And then they have the I guess we could just say real small brain, because they followed it up with this. This is quoting them. Here they say flagrant act of aggression. And then they're going to say why. Okay, because it's the UN. They need to have reason behind it. And this is what they actually put. They says, as international law only permits the use of force in self-defense. And we'll continue. Operation Breaking the Dawn, the operation just now in Gaza, is a flagrant act of aggression. Illegal, immoral, and irresponsible. That's the UN for you. And let me tell you, flagrant act of aggression, and you can't defend yourself. And they're saying that because it's not self-defense. What about this? Luke, tell me. What about this is not self-defense? Can you, what are they trying to say? Can we help them?
They try to kill you. You strike back, so that's not an act of self-defense.
I'm not sure where
terrorists that are dedicated to killing you and digging tunnels into your territory so that they can come across and kill you doesn't just count as self-defense.
How about unprovoked? Unprovoked. Completely. Yeah. Israel just, this is also, you see this all over the headlines. Unprovoked. Israel just got a wild hair and wanted to go kill some Palestinians. What in the cat hair? That's ridiculous. Canadians. This is the Canadians for Justice and Peace in the Middle East. Now, Canadians. You got to learn
They're normally pretty nice.
Yeah, pretty sweet people, but this is really outlandish. They're demanding the Canadian government hold Israeli officials accountable for its unprovoked and aggressive war against Gaza. What are you talking about? Unprovoked? Terror tunnels digging into your territory, rockets. Okay, let's just note. They went in to take out the terror infrastructure before the rockets started firing, but there was 1,100 rockets poised and ready to go. So Israel's not allowed to do a preemptive strike?
Came from the rockets. They must have just happened to be there. I don't know.
Is it against Canadians for Justice and Peace in the Middle East for Israel to do a preemptive strike against rockets that are actually sitting like this, ready to be shot out? Okay, those rockets were ready to be launched. I'm pretty sure that's okay. That's called defending yourself. You don't have to die. I know it's like this modern thing. You need to die, actually, before anybody needs. No, you actually can defend yourself.
Yeah, you don't have to die first.
You just really don't have to die.
For some reason, the world seems to think that Israel should have to die first. They also got targeted.
Yeah.
Targeted terrorist primitive, they say terrorist primitive rockets fell predominantly in open areas, and Israel attacked urban areas. Well, let me tell you why. The terrorists don't know how to aim their rockets, okay? So that's why a lot of them fall in open areas or fall in their own people. And the reason Israel attacks urban areas is because they know how to take out a terrorist leader in his bedroom in a building without touching the rest of the building.
Yeah, exactly.
And also because they like to shoot the rockets out of population centers and hospitals and schools without harming civilians, for the most part.
Luke, the Middle East Eye says, after decades of extrajudicial killings of Palestinians, Israel is no nearer being held accountable. I'm telling you, just
maybe that's because it's justified.
They're saying illegal killings. Again, is Israel the only nation in the world not allowed to defend itself? That's what I'm getting that the Middle East Eye is suggesting to the world, that Israel is not allowed to kill terrorists. Okay, just move it. Ethnic cleansing, for gracious. What are they saying? The electronic intifada, if you can't know by the name, that they're pretty bad dudes. But they go so far as to say it's an ongoing process in Gaza of ethnic cleansing and forced uprooting of Palestinians. And of course, this is all against the indigenous peoples, right?
Israel doesn't do that.
No, it's not happening.
News.
If you consider the ethnic cleansing of a radical Islamic Jihad, it's not ethnic. It's against a group of radical Islamist, jihadic, insane people that just want to kill the whole world off. That's not ethnic cleansing, folks.
It's called
Get your definition.
Good guys and bad guys.
Luke, how about
we could go on?
Yeah, you could just really take this for a long time. They've got to get the definition for civilian right. Are you saying the Canadians also said deeply embarrassed by the Canadians' refusal to condemn Israel's attacks against the civilians in Gaza? Okay, let's set this record straight.
Attack civilians.
Did Israel ever attack civilians? Luke, get this.
Never.
Did you know that in war, there's a high probability, as high as 87%, civilian casualties in wartime? Did you know that?
It's sadly, and it's horrific.
That happens.
And it's awful. It's like journalists. They working in the line of fire. True. It's sad, but it happens because, war typically affects civilian populations. And as much as militaries and governments and nations can try, civilians sometimes get injured or killed. And Israel has probably one of the highest rates of not killing and injuring civilians, but still, they're the only country in the world that's targeted for attacking and killing civilians, even though it's not happening. One
more big thing, and this is we're going to kind of move on, but population. This is one thing that everybody gets wrong. Population. They say, Reuters last year when the May war was going on, they said there's about 1.5 million Palestinians living in Gaza. Gaza has one of the highest population densities and demographic growth in the world. Excuse me. Reuters, you're a news agency that has some clout. Like, people trust what you say. Did you know that Gaza doesn't even show up? When you look at density areas, demographics and growth rates, it doesn't even show up on any charts. But yet, the places that the rockets are going into around Tel Aviv, like Bnei Brak, is the 8th most populated place in the world. Okay, again, flip it on its head. And another city that they're shooting rockets in is called Givatayim, 50th most populated town in the world. And that's where the unpopulated Gaza, if we want to talk about population, is shooting rockets. It's backwards again, folks. The Gazan Terrorists are shooting rockets into some of the world's most populated areas of the world, not just of Israel, of the world. We're talking about 8th most populated place in the world, as in Gaza doesn't even show up on any charts for anywhere close to any world population, high population rates. No, it's all backwards. Not happening.
Josh, we're running out of time, but we got to mention one last thing is, like, I don't understand this issue of a ceasefire. Because ceasefires are about when there's a war happening, you broker a ceasefire, both sides stop, okay?
Yeah.
You don't need, the reason you don't need a ceasefire is because whenever Gaza stops shooting rockets, Israel stops attacking them. Yeah. Okay, in this situation, yes, they targeted a specific terrorist, several specific terrorists, took them out, but they weren't going to keep just, shooting missiles into Gaza. They had a specific mission of rooting out a terrorist leader or stopping terrorist attacks. Why? That's the other term I don't get. Let's stop using the term ceasefire, because Gaza attacks Israel, Israel defends themselves, and they use the opportunity to take out terror tunnels, terrorists, weapons facilities. But when Gaza stops shooting rockets, Israel stops defending themselves. Why do we need a ceasefire? I thought this quote by former Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir kind of really says it all. She said, "When peace comes, we will perhaps in time be able to forgive the Arabs for killing our sons, but it will be harder for us to forgive them for having forced us to kill their sons. Peace will come when the Arabs will love their children more than they hate us." And that's literally what happened in this last conflict, because it was very short. It was like a day and a half, maybe 2 days that rockets were flying. And in that time frame, they killed 4 of their own children by trying to shoot rockets at Israel. So they literally hate Israel more than they love their own children. And that's actually what's happening, guys. You guys, please share this content. The world needs to know it. Mainstream media is not reporting it at all. Here at the Israel Guys, we want you to know the truth of what's happening in the land of Israel. Don't forget, we have a tree planting campaign going on right now. You can plant a tree for $25 in the land of Israel. Go to greeningisrael.com, and don't forget to sign up for a tree planting program. You can help us put those trees in the ground at serveisrael.com. Links are in the description below. Remember to tune out the fake news and tune into what is actually happening here in the land of Israel. We'll be back every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday with your direct connection to the land and people of Israel.